An infertile millionaire showed up to his ex's wedding with two homeless girls. Her reaction shocked everyone. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now enjoy the story. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Daniel Renford turned it over in his hands, the gold-embossed lettering catching the ambient glow of his penthouse office. Eliza Hart and Preston Bellamy cordially invite you. He didn't read the rest. He didn't have to. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline twinkled like distant galaxies, impossibly beautiful and entirely out of reach. The world at Daniel's feet, and yet nothing in it stirred him. Not the quarterly reports piled neatly on his desk, not the hush of success humming beneath the glass and steel around him, and certainly not this ridiculous invitation. He set the envelope down slowly, as if afraid it might shatter. Then he stood, hands braced against the desk, breathing through a tide of memory that arrived uninvited like Eliza always did. Her laugh in the atrium of the Guggenheim, the warmth of her hand tucked under his arm in Zurich, the tremor in her voice the night she walked away. "I want children, Daniel, a family, and you can't give me that. No rage, no cruelty, just fact. The kind of fact that carves itself into bone." Daniel didn't chase her. He couldn't argue with biology. Now here she was again, dressed in ivory cardstock and gilded calligraphy, marrying Preston Bellamy. Of course, Preston, heir to the Bellamy real estate empire, trust fund teeth old money hands. He had what Daniel didn't, a legacy, a father's name that still moved markets, a family that looked good in holiday newsletters, and presumably working sperm. Daniel exhaled sharply and dropped into his leather chair. He stared at the envelope again as if it might rewrite itself if he glared hard enough. Knock, knock. The door creaked open before he answered. Marcus Vale, his oldest friend and most annoying moral compass, strolled in, holding a bag of takeout and a bottle of 15-year Glenlivet. "You look like a man who just got slapped by the past." Daniel didn't answer. Marcus spotted the invitation and whistled low. "She finally did it, huh?" The Eliza Bellamy era begins. Daniel said nothing, just poured 2 fingers of scotch and slid one across the desk. Marcus took it, loosened his tie, and sat across from him. "You going?" Daniel lifted a brow. "To her wedding?" "Yeah. To the woman who dumped me because I couldn't give her a baby, then married a man who probably impregnates women just by shaking hands." Marcus smirked. "Exactly. You should go." Daniel scoffed. "No, really. You're the picture of success. Renford Global just got listed in Forbes again. You've got the penthouse, the prestige, the power, and you're not alone because you're broken. You're alone because you choose to be. I didn't choose infertility. No, but you've let it define you. You loved her once. Show up. Let her see what she left behind. And then walk out like it doesn't matter anymore." Daniel leaned back, scotch untouched in his hand. "What if it still does?" Marcus's smile softened. "Then you show up anyway. So you can stop pretending it doesn't." For a long time, Daniel sat in silence, staring out the window. Outside, the city was alive with movement, people rushing from one thing to another, chasing something or running from it. His life wasn't lacking. It was paused, stalled in the chapter Eliza had closed for him. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it was time to turn the page. He picked up the envelope again. The paper was thick, too thick. A perfect metaphor for Eliza herself, elegant, layered, and heavy with things left unsaid. Daniel didn't RSVP, but he didn't throw it away either. Instead, he placed it in the drawer beside his desk, locked it, and whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what you've become. Eliza Hart." He didn't know it yet, but in less than a week, 2 strange girls would be asleep in the back seat of his car, shivering scared, and holding secrets that would upend everything he thought he knew about family legacy and love. And Eliza's perfect wedding, it would be remembered for something else entirely. The silence after Marcus left was worse than his teasing. Daniel stood alone in the dark-paneled office, the walls lined with accolades that meant nothing tonight. A dozen industry awards glinted under soft track lighting. A framed time cover declaring him the innovator's titan stared back at him with cold detachment. The irony wasn't lost on him, visionary to the world, but blind to his own future. He stepped out onto the penthouse terrace, a glass of scotch finally warming his palm. Manhattan stretched before him like a living organism, flashing, pulsing, buzzing with 1,000 lives he wasn't part of. Across the street, a couple laughed on their balcony, their voices faint but clear. She reached for his hand. He pulled her close. Daniel looked away. He hadn't touched anyone really touched in nearly 5 years. The last time was Eliza. They had been standing in his townhouse kitchen. She'd just come back from a doctor's appointment. He remembered her fingers shaking as she set the mug down. Her lipstick smudged. She'd worn that pale green blouse he once said reminded him of spring. The tests confirmed it. "It's you. We'll look into treatment. There are options." "I don't want options, Daniel. I want a future. We can adopt." "You don't get it." Her voice cracked then. "I want a child who has your eyes, your laugh, your impossible obsession with black coffee and clean code. And you can't give me that." He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't begged. He'd simply stood there paralyzed by the cruel precision of her truth. When she left, she didn't slam the door. It clicked shut, like the lid of a coffin. Now she was marrying Preston Bellamy, a man who built legacy out of land and steel, not code. A man born with every advantage Daniel had clawed for. The Bellamys weren't innovators, they were landlords of the American skyline. Old money, old power, the kind that never had to prove itself. Daniel took a sip of scotch. It tasted like fire. Somewhere inside his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Another buzz, then another. He returned to his desk expecting a crisis. Instead, it was Marcus again. Marcus, 10:42 p.m. Couldn't sleep. Just thought of something. "What if you didn't go alone?" Daniel frowned. Daniel, 10:43 p.m. "Is this where you suggest a date with a PR intern half my age?" Marcus, 10:43 p.m. "No. Someone unexpected. Someone who changes the story." Daniel didn't reply. What story? The one Eliza had already rewritten without him, or the one the world kept trying to tell, that Daniel Renford, brilliant billionaire, was still incomplete because he didn't have an heir. His eyes drifted to the drawer again, to the envelope locked inside. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe showing up wasn't about her at all. Maybe it was about reclaiming the space she abandoned, reclaiming the man she left behind. He didn't know it yet, but at that very moment, 2 small figures were slipping into the back seat of his armored black BMW in the executive garage. Cold, shivering, carrying only a violin case and a sketchbook full of secrets. His story wasn't over. It was just about to begin. The elevator doors sighed open to the dim, echoing quiet of the executive garage. Daniel Renford walked with practiced indifference, coat-sharp footsteps crisp against the polished concrete. It was nearly midnight. The board meeting had run long, full of posturing and hollow vision statements. He'd tuned out somewhere between Q3 projections and the newest market realignment buzzword. None of it mattered. Not tonight. He thumbed the key fob. A quiet beep echoed through the cavernous space. The sleek black BMW parked in the far corner blinked its lights in recognition. The car was spotless, impersonal, like everything else in his life. Daniel pulled open the driver's side door and froze. Something had moved in the back seat. Just a flicker of shadow, a shift in the dark leather interior, but unmistakably human. His jaw tightened. Instinct flared. He reached for the concealed panic button under the dash installed for emergencies he never thought he'd actually encounter. But then came the voice. Soft, trembling. "Please don't call anyone. We'll go." He leaned in, eyes adjusting to the darkness inside the cabin. 2 girls, huddled, barely visible under a crumpled blanket. One older, maybe 10, sat upright with defiant shoulders. Her arms were wrapped around the smaller one, who looked no more than 7, and was curled up, fast asleep, her tiny hands clutching something tightly to her chest. Daniel blinked. What the hell, we just needed somewhere warm. The older girl interrupted. Her voice was clear, but her eyes darted, calculating. Not street slick, not quite scared, more like trained. Defensive. I have security cameras, Daniel said coolly. She didn't flinch. Then you already know we didn't break anything. Her hair was pulled back into a frayed braid. The coat she wore was 2 sizes too big, cinched tight at the waist with a strip of ribbon. She looked like she was trying hard to appear older than she was. The younger one stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about snow. Daniel exhaled, uncertain. You can't be here. We'll leave. The girl started nudging the younger one awake, but her grip on the violin case never loosened. That's when Daniel noticed it. Not a toy. A real weathered instrument. Too nice for runaways. Too familiar. He hesitated. Everything in him screamed, call security. Call child services. Walk away. But something about the girl's tone, her poise. It pulled at a thread he couldn't name. Where are your parents? He asked. We don't have any. A beat of silence. You're runaways. The older girl didn't answer, just tilted her chin higher. We're not stealing. We just needed warmth. Daniel closed the door quietly, stepped around and slid into the driver's seat. He didn't turn on the ignition. I can't take you home, he said. The girl's eyes narrowed. We don't have a home. Then I should call someone. Child protective. No. Her voice snapped like a violin string. She startled herself. The younger girl blinked awake. Where are we? The little one whispered. Daniel turned to look at her fully now, pale, exhausted, and heartbreakingly soft-featured. She blinked up at him, clutching the violin case like it was made of bone china. Is he a driver? She asked. No, the older girl murmured, gaze still locked on Daniel. He's the owner. Of the car, of everything. Daniel let out a tired breath. I'm just a man trying to go home. The older girl watched him. Then let us stay until morning. Just the night. We'll be gone before breakfast. You think I'm going to let 2 strangers sleep in my car? You don't have to. Just don't make us go outside. Not yet. Daniel stared at her, at both of them. His hand hovered over the gear shift, then dropped. Get in properly. Put your seatbelts on. The older girl blinked, surprised. I said one night, Daniel repeated. He didn't know what made him say yes. Maybe it was the frost forming on the inside of the windshield. Maybe it was the ghost of something raw in the little girl's face. Or maybe it was because for a moment he saw himself in them adrift unclaimed. Whatever it was enough. As the car pulled out into the soft rain, neither girl spoke again. The older one leaned her forehead against the window. The younger fell back asleep, cradling her case. Daniel didn't ask their names. Not yet. He just drove. The windshield wipers beat a slow, rhythmic pattern as Daniel navigated the quiet streets of Manhattan, the rain softening into a whisper across glass. Beside him, the older girl sat stone-faced in silence, her posture too straight for a child. The younger one, Lily, if he'd caught the sleepy mumble correctly, was already asleep again. Her head resting on her sister's lap arms, wrapped tightly around the violin case, like a secret she refused to part with. Daniel had been quiet for blocks, but his mind was a storm of questions. Who were they? Why his car? And what were 2 girls this young doing in the garage of Renford Global, a space accessible only by badge swipe entry? He glanced in the rearview mirror. The older girl met his eyes through the reflection. She didn't look away. What's your name? He asked, voice low. A pause. Kara, she answered finally. And hers is Lily. Last names. Her jaw tightened. Vaughn. It didn't sound rehearsed, but it didn't sound confident either. You chose my car by accident, he asked, watching for her reaction. Kara turned back to the window. We didn't pick it. It was just open. It wasn't. She said nothing. Daniel resisted the urge to push further. He'd built his empire by recognizing when people were hiding something, and Kara Vaughn was holding back a hurricane. He pulled into the underground entrance of his residential tower, nodding at the night concierge who gave no reaction. Renford's staff were trained not to question his privacy, but even so, 2 soaking wet children climbing out of the CEO's back seat would be tomorrow's whispered rumor. As the elevator rose in silence, Lily stirred again, blinking blearily at the marble walls. "This isn't the train," she murmured. "No," Daniel said gently. "This is home. For now." The elevator dinged. They stepped into the sprawling penthouse, minimalist, masculine, and silent. Every surface gleamed. Not a photo frame in sight. Kara scanned the space with the same sharp, sweeping glance Daniel used when sizing up competitors. He moved toward the kitchen, shrugged off his coat. "You hungry?" Lily nodded, eyes wide. "Food's in the fridge. Bathroom's down the hall." He gestured without looking. "Towels are in the basket. Thank you," Kara said stiffly. Daniel opened the fridge, set a carton of eggs and a package of pancake mix on the counter. He wasn't a cook, but he could manage something warm. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't want to order delivery tonight. It felt wrong. "Why pancakes?" Kara asked, suddenly stepping behind him, still in that oversized coat. He flipped one on the pan. "Because that's what my mom used to make when I couldn't sleep." Silence. He glanced back. Kara was watching him. Not suspiciously, not warmly, just measuring. "You don't look like someone who couldn't sleep," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "That's because I learned how to hide it." Lily padded in barefoot now, her cheeks flushed from washing. She climbed onto a bar stool and placed her violin case gently on the counter beside her. "Can we stay until Monday?" she asked, almost a whisper. "We won't touch anything." Daniel looked between them 2 girls who had no reason to trust him and yet weren't afraid. 2 shadows in the back seat who'd somehow stepped into his life like they belonged there all along. "One night," he said, sliding a plate toward her. "We'll see after that." Lily smiled. Kara did not, but for the first time she didn't argue. By morning, the rain had softened to mist, draping the city skyline in a foggy hush. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of Daniel Renford's penthouse Manhattan looked like a watercolor, blurred, delicate, unreal. It was the kind of morning Daniel usually spent reviewing quarterly reports over black coffee in solitude. But today, the scent of vanilla pancakes lingered in the air, and the quiet was occasionally broken by the gentle sound of humming. Lily sat cross-legged on the velvet stool at the kitchen island, her chin resting on the lid of her violin case. Her plate had been scraped clean, maple syrup still streaking the rim. She was humming something soft and strange, a melody Daniel didn't recognize, but it stirred something. Something old. Kara stood by the window, arms folded, gaze fixed on the skyline. Her damp braid had been redone neater now with an elastic Daniel found in one of his bathroom drawers. She hadn't touched her pancakes. "You know," Daniel said, lowering his coffee mug, "it's not poison." Kara glanced at him without turning her head. "We already ate last night, and now it's a new day." He motioned to the untouched plate. "That's how breakfast works." She didn't smile, but she stepped over anyway and took a cautious seat, cutting her pancake into tiny, perfect squares. Lily peered up at Daniel. "Your fridge has 6 types of butter." He blinked. "I didn't know that. It also has truffle honey and frozen duck confit," she added brightly. "I read all the labels." Kara shot her a warning look, but Daniel only chuckled. "Curious, aren't you?" "She reads everything," Kara muttered, not looking up. "I like words," Lily said. "They feel like little puzzles." Daniel studied them, not bothering to hide his interest. "You both talk like no children I've ever met." Kara shrugged. "We read. A lot." "What else do you do?" he asked. Kara didn't answer. Lily's fingers wandered to the clasps of her violin case. "Sometimes we play music. Mama taught us." There it was again. That aching tug. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What kind of music?" "Mostly classical," Lily said, running a finger across the worn leather. "Sometimes I make up my own." "Kara says I shouldn't, but I like it." "I never said you shouldn't." Kara interrupted. I said you should finish the ones you start. Lily grinned. That's different. Daniel noticed the sketchbook tucked beneath Lily's elbow, now half hidden. Is that yours? She slid it closer, suddenly shy. It's just drawings. Nothing important. Kara quickly shifted the subject. When are we leaving? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Why assume we're going anywhere? You said one night. He nodded slowly. I did. He stood moving to the kitchen console where his phone and keys rested. He picked up a small envelope, cream, thick and still sealed. Eliza's wedding invitation. You ever been to a vineyard? He asked almost idly. Kara frowned. A vineyard? There's one in Napa. Beautiful place. Terrible music. Excellent wine. He turned, watching their reactions. A wedding, actually. This weekend. Lily perked up. You're going to a wedding? Kara shot her another look. We're not guests. We're not family. Daniel hesitated. No, he said. But if I show up alone, the whispers will be worse than the wine. Kara narrowed her eyes. You want us to pretend I'm offering you a weekend away? Warm beds, good food, safety. Why? Daniel met her stare evenly. Because I don't think you just wandered into the wrong car. The room went still. A faint hum from the city below. The soft tapping of Lily's finger on her violin case. Kara's eyes darkened, not with fear, but with calculation. Measuring him again. If we go, she said slowly, Lily stays with me, always. Daniel nodded. Of course. Lily beamed. Do we get to dress fancy? Daniel allowed himself the smallest smile. We'll see. As the girls returned to their plates, Kara still cautious, Lily quietly thrilled, Daniel picked up his phone and sent a single text to Marcus Need, a private tailor. 2 girls, discreet, and run a soft background check, names Kara and Lily Vaughn. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he was starting to suspect that whoever these girls were, they weren't here by accident. They were a beginning, not just of something new, but of something long buried. By mid-afternoon, the penthouse had begun to shift. It was subtle at first, a blanket left on the couch, a half-drunk glass of orange juice near the piano. Daniel noticed these things not with irritation, but with a strange, quiet awareness, like the space had been waiting for something to interrupt its sterility. Or someone. He stood in the hallway outside the guest room, listening. Inside, the girls were talking in hushed tones, their voices alternating in rhythm. Kara steady, deliberate. Lily light and skipping like a stone over water. He couldn't make out the words, but he caught laughter. Laughter. It echoed down the corridor like a foreign song in a language he'd forgotten. Daniel returned to the living room and found himself staring at the spot where Lily had set her violin case that morning. It was now resting atop the piano bench, a place of honor, as though it belonged there all along. The case was old scuffed leather, worn but lovingly maintained. He had a sudden, inexplicable urge to open it. He didn't. Instead, he walked to the bar cart, poured a half glass of Pellegrino, and stood with it in hand as the intercom buzzed. Mr. Renford, your guests from Maison Lucien have arrived. Send them up. A few minutes later, the elevator doors slid open to reveal a stylish woman in her 40s, with a measuring tape around her neck, a digital tablet under one arm, and 2 assistants trailing behind her with garment bags. She wore kitten heels and a look of studied detachment, the kind that could cut down egos for a living. Mr. Renford, she said crisply, my team is at your disposal. Kara appeared first. Her hair had been rebraided tighter this time, and her expression flickered between suspicion and curiosity as she eyed the garment bags. Are we getting costumes? Lily trailed behind, barefoot again, hugging her sketchbook. She looked up at Daniel with wonder. Is this for the wedding? He nodded. If we're going to a Bellamy Vineyard wedding, we can't exactly show up in oversized hoodies. The stylist cleared her throat politely. We brought an assortment of children's formal wear, nothing overly frilly. I don't wear pink, Kara said flatly. You don't have to, Daniel replied. Just let them take your measurements. Kara looked at the stylist, then back to Daniel. We don't owe you anything. No, he said. You don't. Still, she stepped forward. As the stylists got to work in the guest room, Daniel retreated to his office. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and pulled up the company's internal background check interface. He typed the names slowly. Kara Vaughn. Lily Vaughn. A wheel spun. Searching. Nothing. No school records, no medical entries, no address history, no social services flag. Just blank space. He frowned, clicked deeper, entered alternative spellings. Still nothing. Untraceable. He murmured aloud. Behind him, Lily's music began to drift through the penthouse. A soft, tentative melody on the grand piano, hesitant at first, then blooming into something richer. It wasn't a children's tune. It was layered, complex. It was a lullaby that sounded like morning. Daniel turned slowly, drawn to the sound, and watched as Lily, barely tall enough to reach the pedals, played from memory, eyes closed. Kara stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching, protecting. Daniel whispered to no one. "Who are you?" Neither girl answered. But the music did. It began with a zipper. Kara stood in front of the floor-length mirror, stiff as a board, her arms held out slightly like she was bracing for impact. One of the stylists, a young woman with nervous hands, fumbled with the delicate fabric of a dark navy dress. It wasn't frilly, and it wasn't pink, but it shimmered faintly under the lights, a subtle thread of silver catching at the collar and cuffs. Simple, elegant, severe. "This one's too tight," Kara muttered, twisting her shoulder away. "It's a size down from what we measured," the stylist replied carefully. "But the other one didn't suit your frame." Daniel watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Kara caught his reflection in the mirror. "Why do we have to look like this?" "You don't," he said calmly. "But you'll be walking into a place where appearances are armor. Trust me, it's easier to fight in silk than in rags." She studied him. "You think this is a fight?" Daniel hesitated. "I think showing up at a wedding hosted by someone who once left you for a wealthier bloodline is never not a battle." Kara turned back to the mirror. "I don't care about impressing anyone." He smiled faintly. "That's your advantage." In the adjoining room, Lily twirled in a pale champagne-colored dress, one that fluttered around her like something from a dream. She had insisted on keeping her violin case close. She wouldn't let it out of her sight, not even while she tried on shoes. The stylists had worked around it. "I feel like a garden fairy," she declared, arms spread wide. "You look like one too," said one of the assistants. Lily paused, then looked up at Daniel, who had just stepped in. "Do you think my mom would have liked this one?" Daniel blinked. "I think she would have loved it." She beamed. "Then I'll wear it." As she turned back to the mirror, her reflection flickered into view beside his, and Daniel felt something strange stir inside him. Not pity, not responsibility, belonging. Later that evening, the girls sat curled up on the oversized couch in his living room, watching an old musical on the projector wall. Lily had her sketchbook open in her lap, doodling the characters as they danced. Kara sat close, but her eyes were elsewhere, tracking the shadows, the exits, the places people forget to look. "You two act older than you are?" Daniel said, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate into the room. "We had to," Kara replied without looking at him. Lily glanced up. "We used to pretend we were in a storybook. Kara always said, 'No one saves you. You have to write your own ending.'" Daniel set the mugs down. "She's not wrong." There was a beat of silence. Then Kara asked, "And what about you? Why are you going to this wedding?" He leaned against the edge of the couch. "Because I got an invitation from someone who once said I'd never be enough. And now you're showing her she was wrong." Daniel thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I'm going to show myself." Kara looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she didn't seem like she was searching for a threat. "You're not like most rich people," she said finally. "Thanks, I think." Lily yawned and leaned her head on Kara's shoulder. "Do we still have to pretend to be your nieces?" "It's just for the weekend," Daniel said softly. "After that, we figure out what comes next." Outside, the rain had stopped. The city twinkled again beneath clearing clouds. Inside the penthouse no longer felt like a monument to emptiness. It felt like something was beginning. It began with a zipper. Kara stood in front of the floor-length mirror, stiff as a board, her arms held out slightly like she was bracing for impact. One of the stylists, a young woman with nervous hands, fumbled with the delicate fabric of a dark navy dress. It wasn't frilly and it wasn't pink, but it shimmered faintly under the lights, a subtle thread of silver catching at the collar and cuffs. Simple, elegant, severe. "This one's too tight," Kara muttered, twisting her shoulder away. "It's a size down from what we measured," the stylist replied carefully, "but the other one didn't suit your frame." Daniel watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Kara caught his reflection in the mirror. "Why do we have to look like this?" "You don't," he said calmly, "but you'll be walking into a place where appearances are armor. Trust me, it's easier to fight in silk than in rags." She studied him. "You think this is a fight?" Daniel hesitated. "I think showing up at a wedding hosted by someone who once left you for a wealthier bloodline is never not a battle." Kara turned back to the mirror. "I don't care about impressing anyone." He smiled faintly. "That's your advantage." In the adjoining room, Lily twirled in a pale, champagne-colored dress, one that fluttered around her like something from a dream. She had insisted on keeping her violin case close. She wouldn't let it out of her sight, not even while she tried on shoes. The stylists had worked around it, tying a delicate ribbon to match the dress around the handle like it was part of her outfit. "I feel like a garden fairy," she declared, arms spread wide. "You look like one too," said one of the assistants. Lily paused, then looked up at Daniel, who had just stepped in. "Do you think my mom would have liked this one?" Daniel blinked. "I think she would have loved it." She beamed. "Then I'll wear it." As she turned back to the mirror, her reflection flickered into view beside his, and Daniel felt something strange stir inside him. Not pity, not responsibility, belonging. By the time the stylists packed up their supplies and left, the girls had changed back into their regular clothes, carefully folding their dresses into garment bags with more gentleness than Daniel expected. Kara helped Lily adjust the violin strap across her chest as if it were armor. Daniel walked into the living room and found himself hesitating before speaking. "I thought we'd have dinner in," he said. "There's a chef I work with who—" Kara raised a hand. "We're not fancy." Daniel gave a soft chuckle. "Neither is spaghetti. But it's better when someone who knows what they're doing makes it." That night, over bowls of fresh pasta and warm bread, the penthouse no longer felt like his alone. The silence that used to feel calming now buzzed with quiet conversation, the kind that skipped between subjects like stones across a lake. Kara talked sparingly, but when she did, it was sharp and insightful. She asked questions about the wedding guest list, the venue, who Preston Bellamy really was. Daniel was surprised by her interest until he realized she wasn't being nosy. She was scouting. "You're planning something," he said. "I don't like surprises," she replied, wiping her mouth. Lily, on the other hand, had opened up completely. She asked what time the wedding was, whether horses would be there, if she could draw on the airplane. When Daniel said they'd take the company jet, she whispered, "Whoa," like it was a magic carpet. After dinner, Lily slipped away to the music room again. Daniel had installed the baby grand on a whim years ago, never expecting it to be used. She opened the lid and began playing something soft, something that sounded like snowfall. Daniel stood behind the glass partition and listened. Kara joined him. "She doesn't remember the accident," Kara said, barely above a whisper. He turned toward her. "She was too young. I remember everything. But Lily, she just remembers music." Daniel swallowed hard. "And your parents?" Kara didn't answer for a moment. "They were good. Too good for what happened." She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. He stood beside her watching Lily play, and he didn't speak. Not about the scars or the lies or the silence in his own life that had begun to feel less permanent with each note Lily played. Later, as the girls settled into the guest room, Daniel walked the penthouse alone. The dresses hung like quiet ghosts in their bags, waiting for tomorrow. The violin rested in its case. The sketchbook sat beside it, pages slightly curled from use. His phone buzzed. Marcus. No matches for Kara or Lily Vaughn. Not in any state database. No school enrollment. No hospital ID. You've found ghosts, my friend. Daniel stared at the message, then looked out the window at the city below. Not ghosts, he thought. Clues. And something about the way the night had unfolded told him the wedding wouldn't be the only thing exposed this weekend. The vineyard estate in Napa Valley looked like it had been plucked from a European postcard and dropped gently onto American soil. Lush green hills cascading into the horizon, rows of grapevines cut with surgical precision, and a main hall so extravagantly adorned with orchids and gold leaf accents that it made even Daniel Renford pause. He hated it immediately. It wasn't the wealth, it was the performance of it, the curated elegance, the way the valet smirked slightly when he opened Daniel's door, recognizing him, the way the guests turned their heads before they knew why, and the way Eliza had probably planned it all down to the color of the champagne flutes. Kara and Lily stepped out of the car behind him and the world stilled. Gasps rippled like a quiet wave. Two girls poised, graceful, mysterious, the older one in navy silk chin, high gaze sharp, the younger in champagne lace, her violin case cradled in both arms like a treasure. A whisper drifted through the crowd. Are those his? I thought he couldn't have kids. Is he married? Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, ignoring the murmurs. Kara did the same. Lily smiled and waved at someone who wasn't there. They walked the cobblestone path toward the ceremony tent, flanked by guests too stunned to step aside. Daniel didn't slow. He never did. Inside, a string quartet played something vapid and expensive. Servers moved like clockwork, offering flutes of peach-infused champagne and gold-dusted hors d'oeuvres. Preston Bellamy was laughing too loudly near the floral archway, shaking hands with an oil executive. Then she appeared. Eliza Hart Bellamy, though the name hadn't legally changed yet, stood beneath a canopy of roses, a sleeveless cream gown sculpted to perfection. Her hair swept into a soft chignon, her smile frozen in place as she caught sight of them. She faltered mid-sentence, her eyes locked with Daniel's, and then they dropped to Kara, to Lily, to the violin case. Something flickered in her expression, panic, disbelief, calculation. She didn't move. Daniel inclined his head slightly like a diplomat at a peace treaty. Kara spoke first. Which one is the groom? Daniel raised a brow. The one with the permanent tan and the I own everything posture. Kara squinted. They all look like that. Lily leaned close and whispered, Can we eat something soon? He chuckled. Soon. Across the room, Preston's gaze followed Eliza's line of sight. He spotted Daniel and then the girls. His jaw twitched. The smile died. They didn't approach the altar. They veered toward the long reception tent beside the vineyard where tables were already being set with place cards and towering arrangements. Daniel scanned the cards until he found his. Mr. Daniel Renford, +1. He lifted it and replaced it with one of his own, handwritten on the flight over. +2. A voice behind him, I thought you'd come alone. Daniel turned. Eliza stood at the edge of the table, arms crossed. Her voice was tight, controlled. And I thought you'd elope, he replied smoothly. She glanced at the girls. Who are they? Guests, he said. Like me. That one, she said, eyes fixed on Lily, is carrying a violin case. That's not an accessory. No, Daniel said. She plays. Kara stepped between them. We're his nieces. The words were clear, calculated, delivered with poise. Eliza blinked. I didn't know you had siblings. Daniel smiled thinly. Neither did I. Eliza's voice dropped to a whisper. Is this a stunt, Daniel? You tell me, he said. This is your show. She looked at him, then really looked. And something passed between them. Not affection, not hatred. History. Before she could speak again, Lily wandered over to the reception piano, an elegant white baby grand tucked beside the wine bar. She opened the lid gently, placed her fingers on the keys, played a single, trembling note. The room fell quiet. She began to play. Not a popular song, not wedding music, a piece that sounded older than the air around them. Melancholy, complex, haunting, Guests turned. Servers paused. Even Preston looked confused. A woman near the back whispered, "Where did she learn that?" Kara's eyes darted to a tall man by the wine table, a guest in his 60s, sharp features glasses perched low on his nose. He leaned toward another guest and murmured something. Recognition. Daniel noticed it too. He turned to Kara. "Do you know that man?" She didn't blink. "He's in one of my mother's photographs." Daniel's stomach dropped. The man, now watching Lily with strange intensity, leaned over and whispered something to a younger associate who nodded and slipped away discreetly. Daniel moved toward Lily just as she finished the piece. The room erupted in murmurs. He knelt beside her. "Where did you learn that?" She smiled shyly. "Mama's music book." He turned the page and spotted it, the handwritten sheet notes neatly penned but altered. In the margins, numbers, letters, sequences, a code. He looked up. Kara stood across the room, her eyes locked on his. "Don't say anything." He closed the book gently. The performance had just begun. The applause was polite at first, scattered claps from guests who weren't sure whether to be impressed or unsettled. But as Lily gave a small curtsy and let the piano lid fall, slowly closed, silence swelled back into the room like fog. It wasn't just that a child had played something extraordinary. It was what she had played. Eliza's eyes had narrowed long before the last note. "That song," she murmured under her breath. "Where have I heard that before?" Daniel rose slowly from beside Lily, the sheet of music still lightly pinched between his fingers. Kara had moved in close again, protective as a shadow, her body angled to block her sister's small form. Eliza stepped forward, voice sharp and quiet. "That's not just a melody. That's Margaret Blackthorn's dirge." Daniel froze. So did Kara. Eliza stared at Lily now as though she were no longer a child but a cipher. That piece wasn't published. It was played once at Margaret's funeral before the recording was sealed by the family estate. "How do you know that?" Daniel asked. Her lips pressed thin. "I was briefly engaged to a man who worked in rare music licensing. It came across his desk. No public copies exist." Daniel looked at the paper in his hand again. The clefs were drawn with meticulous care. The notes looped cleanly, but between the measures inside the stems, hidden where only trained eyes might notice, were strings of oddities. A G clef that curved a degree too far. A half rest with a slash mark through it. Notes spaced in uneven groupings, almost like they weren't meant to be played but counted. Kara reached out and gently tugged the paper from Daniel's hand. "This doesn't belong here." Daniel didn't resist. "I need to speak with you," Eliza said, stepping closer to him. Her voice was still low but brittle. "Privately." Kara bristled. "We're not leaving him alone with you." Daniel held up a hand. "It's all right." Kara's eyes locked with his. He didn't flinch. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and moved to Lily's side, hand resting on her shoulder. Daniel and Eliza stepped away from the crowd behind a lattice wall covered in climbing roses. It barely offered privacy, but it muffled sound. "What are you doing, Daniel?" she hissed. "Attending a wedding," he replied evenly. "You're making a scene, a spectacle. You invited me. I didn't invite you with children." Daniel smiled faintly. "I didn't come to hurt you, Eliza. But I didn't come to protect your fantasy either." She paused, studying him. "Those girls, they're not yours. They can't be." "No," he admitted. "But they have a story. And I think it's one your new in-laws may not want told." Her expression changed, not to guilt, to fear. "You don't know what you're playing with." "I didn't know sheet music could carry evidence," he said quietly. "But here we are." Eliza opened her mouth, then closed it. In the distance, the string quartet resumed playing, but the mood had shifted. The real wedding drama hadn't begun. It had only been invited. The reception had shifted into something tense and uneasy, like a masquerade where everyone suddenly remembered they were wearing masks. Daniel returned to the table where Kara and Lily sat, their plates untouched. Kara's eyes tracked him like a hawk. Lily was sketching quietly in her notebook, drawing the vines that twisted along the edges of the canopy. They didn't like the song, she said without looking up. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat beside her. They weren't expecting it. But it was pretty, she murmured. Mama used to play it when she thought we were asleep. Kara's shoulders stiffened. You shouldn't have played it, Lily. I wanted to, she whispered. Daniel leaned in. That piece, did your mother write it? Kara didn't answer. Lily nodded solemnly. She said it was a song that remembered things. Daniel exhaled slowly, then turned to Kara. Eliza recognized it. She said it was Margaret Blackthorne's dirge. She knew the melody, and she said it was never published. Kara's voice was flat. Of course she knows. Everyone who's connected to them knows. That's the problem. He looked at her closely. You're not just hiding. You're hiding from them. Before she could answer, a server approached with a folded napkin and a strained smile. From the man by the wine bar, he said, nodding subtly across the room. Daniel took the napkin. Inside was a scrap of paper, a small square tier of stiff stationery with handwriting scrawled in precise ink. That song wasn't forgotten. Meet me behind the cellar at 5:30. Come alone. Bring the sheet. He looked up just in time to see the older gentleman who had watched Lily earlier disappear through a set of side doors. Kara read the note over his shoulder. Don't go. Why not? Because that man works for Blackthorne Holdings. He's not just a guest. He's an asset. Daniel looked at her. And what does that make you? Kara's eyes met his. A liability. Before he could respond, Lily reached across the table and opened her violin case, not to reveal the instrument itself, but to slide the false bottom out with surprising speed. Beneath the velvet lay several sheets of music paper, some folded, some yellowed. One had been re-inked recently. At first glance, they all appeared to be scores, but Daniel could see it now. There was a pattern, a treble clef with an unusual loop, bass notes that when counted across measures mirrored a phone number format. He lifted one page, heart hammering. This isn't music. It's all music, Lily said quietly. You just have to know what to listen for. Kara stood. We need to leave. Now. But someone wants to help. Or someone wants to confirm we're still alive, Kara snapped. And if they do, it's only a matter of time before Edmund Blackthorne does too. The name hit like a dropped piano. Daniel didn't move. Eliza's connected to him, Kara said. That's why she panicked. That song is a key, and they've kept the doors locked for years. Daniel's phone buzzed. Marcus. You were right. Blackthorne Holdings is a silent investor in the Bellamy Fund. The girls match old missing persons reports scrubbed in 2016. Charlotte and Liliana Blackthorne, daughters of Charles and Margaret, declared dead in a yacht explosion 6 years ago. Daniel stared at the screen, then at the girls. I don't believe in ghosts, he said. Kara looked him dead in the eyes. Then congratulations. You're living with two. Daniel stared at the name on his screen, Charlotte and Liliana Blackthorne, as if it might rearrange itself into something less impossible. But the letters held. So did the weight. The Blackthorne yacht explosion had made national news. A prestigious family with philanthropic reach old East Coast money, a string of boarding schools and summer estates, and a tragedy that ended it all. The parents dead. The children presumed drowned. Bodies never recovered. Public grief polished to a fine, cold edge, but here they were, in silk dresses and borrowed shoes, eating his pasta, sleeping in his guest room, drawing vines and playing music with secrets inside. He looked up slowly from his phone. Kara had turned away from the crowd and was helping Lily back into her coat, even though they weren't leaving yet. Her fingers moved quickly, habitually. Not a child's hands, survivor's hands. You knew this would catch up to you, Daniel said quietly. Kara didn't look at him. Everything catches up. We were just trying to stay ahead of it. You're the Blackthorne heirs, he said. Not a question. Kara gave a slight shake of her head. We were. Daniel's eyes drifted back to the music sheet. Why hide the truth in music? Lily answered this time, her voice small but clear. Because Grandpa never listened to it. Daniel blinked. Your grandfather, Kara's mouth tightened. Edmund Blackthorne, our mother's father. He wanted the family fortune. The yacht explosion wasn't an accident. Our parents didn't drown. They were erased, and you two hidden, Kara said. Moved around, always just long enough. Foster homes, private shelters, our names changed, but the music never changed. Mama taught Lily to encode things, dates, accounts, passwords into notation. Lily nodded. I memorized them. She said someday someone good would know how to read it. Daniel sat back, the weight of their story tightening around his lungs. He wasn't the man they were waiting for, but he was the man who found them. Or maybe the man they'd chosen. Kara's eyes locked onto his again. You're going to the meeting, aren't you? He didn't answer right away. The man behind the cellar might be a threat, she said, or he might be the only person left who remembers we existed. Daniel looked at the music, the loops, the code, the melody that had stopped an entire wedding. If you were me, he asked, what would you do? Kara hesitated. Then I'd take the sheet. I'd go alone. But I'd make sure someone was watching the exit with a camera and an open line to the police. Daniel nodded slowly. And what would you do if you were me, and you had no idea how to protect two girls from $1 billion empire with a body count? Kara's expression didn't change. I'd learn fast. As the sun dipped lower behind the vineyard hills, Daniel folded the sheet into his inner pocket. In his ear, the last notes of Lily's melody lingered, haunting, precise, a warning in disguise, and an invitation into war. The vineyard cellar sat beneath the main reception hall, old stone steps winding downward, walls lined with barrels, the air cool and thick with aged oak and secrets. Daniel moved quietly. He had taken Kara's advice, no entourage, no security detail. Just the folded sheet of music in his inside pocket and his phone recording audio in the lining of his blazer. Marcus was on standby, tracking location data and ready to call the local sheriff if anything went wrong. The only sound in the cellar was the distant drip of condensation on stone. Then footsteps. Measured, heavy, purposeful. From the far end of the barrel-lined corridor, the older man from the reception appeared. Same wire-rimmed glasses, same stately posture. But now his smile was gone. You came, he said, voice low and papery. I don't like being summoned, Daniel replied. But I don't like riddles even more. The man nodded toward a small table between two barrels. On it sat 2 wine glasses, only one filled. The other remained untouched. I'm not here to poison you, he said, reading Daniel's eyes. That would be far too loud. Daniel didn't sit. Who are you, Malcolm Arledge? The man said, folding his hands. Formerly counsel to the Blackthorne family. Now more of a liability. Or perhaps an inconvenient witness. Daniel's heartbeat ticked upward. Malcolm gestured toward the pocket square where the edge of the music sheet peeked out. I saw your girl play it. Beautiful. Your girl's mother, Margaret, was brilliant. Before Edmund had her silenced. She was your client, Daniel said flatly. I said I was counsel, not loyal. Daniel pulled the sheet from his jacket and unfolded it slowly. What is this? Malcolm reached into his coat and pulled out a folded page of his own, a ledger printout. Side by side, the patterns aligned, coded account numbers embedded in the notation. Offshore funds, transfer dates, shell corporations under the Bellamy Foundation. Daniel's mind raced. This is evidence of financial fraud, he said. At the highest levels. Malcolm nodded. It's also evidence that your ex-fiancée's new husband is laundering Blackthorne blood money. Edmund needed a compliant son-in-law to move assets under the radar. Preston was all too willing. Daniel let out a quiet breath, and Eliza Malcolm's eyes narrowed. She knows. She's always known. But she chose to believe in the future Edmund promised her. Legacy, power, a name that never disappears. Daniel folded the music sheet back into his jacket. Why tell me all this? Because those girls shouldn't be erased, and you're the only man in that reception hall who doesn't owe Edmund Blackthorne his silence. A sudden noise above, heels clacking, then shouting, muffled. Daniel stepped forward. What's happening? Malcolm looked past him, suddenly alert. I think your time's up. Back in the main hall, chaos bloomed. Eliza stood near the altar, white dress rippling in the wind that blew through the opened French doors. Her voice sliced through the murmurs. He's not who he says he is. He brought those girls here to destroy this day. He's using them. Preston barked orders to security. Flashbulbs exploded. A reporter was already live streaming on a phone. Kara stepped in front of Lily. Don't say a word. Daniel emerged from the cellar, composed but burning. He crossed the grass and reached the girls just as two security guards advanced. You need to come with us, sir. She's not your niece, Eliza shouted. They're not even supposed to be alive, gasps. And then silence. One moment of awful, echoing silence. Kara stepped forward. We're not orphans, she said, voice cold and precise. We're survivors. Preston surged forward. Get them out of here. Now. Don't you touch them, Daniel warned, stepping between them. Touch them and I hand over the sheet, the coded accounts, every one of Edmund's dirty secrets. A phone beeped. Marcus from New York already sent to the press. You're live. Stay calm. Daniel smiled, tight, dangerous. Too late, Preston. Everyone's listening now. Eliza's face went pale. And across the lawn behind the swirl of chaos, Malcolm Arledge slipped away unseen. The air was buzzing, not just with voices, but with something sharper panic. Not everyone in the crowd knew exactly what had happened, but they knew it was something. Guests clutched champagne flutes mid-sip, frozen. Phones were out now, cameras tilted at odd angles, catching fragments. Kara's declaration, Eliza's outburst, Daniel, stepping protectively in front of the girls. Someone whispered, "Did she say they're not supposed to be alive?" And just like that, the facade began to crack. Eliza was trembling, not from rage, but from the crumbling edge of a tower she'd built too high on silence. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Preston grabbed her wrist too hard, pulling her back toward the altar. Get control of yourself, he hissed. They'll ruin everything, she whispered. They already have. Not far away, Daniel's phone buzzed again. Marcus, efficient as ever, TMZ has it. So does Reuters. We're prepping statements. Police will call you within the hour. Stand by. Daniel slid the phone into his pocket and turned to Kara and Lily crouching to their eye level. You trust me? He asked. Lily looked to Kara, who gave the smallest nod. We do, Lily whispered. He straightened, just as two vineyard security guards began approaching, uncertain, caught between orders and confusion. We have to escort the minors. Daniel didn't move. Touch them and it's child endangerment. Every journalist here has their phone trained on you. Smile for the court case. One of the guards hesitated, glancing nervously at a hovering drone camera above the vineyard. The other stopped entirely. Eliza tried again, voice strained but loud. Daniel is not their guardian. He brought them here as a stunt. He's exploiting them. Daniel met her eyes across the reception lawn, the distance between them, full of memories and ashes. Then let them speak, he called. Let them say who they are. Kara stepped forward without waiting for permission. I'm Kara Blackthorne, she said clearly, voice like flint. This is my sister Liliana. Every head turned. The name hit like a thunderclap. And we're not gone. Kara continued. We're not victims, and we're not anyone's property. A new wave of silence rolled across the crowd, deeper than the last. Then came a single audible sob from a woman near the bar, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. I remember them. From the fundraiser, the year before the accident. Margaret's girls. Lily stepped beside Kara, violin case in hand. She said nothing. She didn't have to. In the center of all this, Daniel stood tall, one hand resting on Lily's shoulder. His voice rang out calm and final. I came to this wedding expecting to leave empty-handed. Instead, I found something worth protecting. He turned his back to the altar, to Preston's clenched jaw and Eliza's ghost-white face. Then, as if on cue, a police cruiser rolled up the gravel drive in the distance. The reckoning had arrived. And this time, Daniel wasn't the one running. The vineyard disappeared behind them. In the rearview mirror, rows of perfect grapes rolling into shadow as Daniel's car sped through winding hills. The setting sun bled across the windshield in a blaze of orange, but inside the cabin silence settled thick and heavy. Kara sat in the back seat beside Lily, her arms tightly wrapped around her sister. The violin case rested across both their laps like a boundary line between past and present, between exposure and the fragile hope of safety. No one spoke for miles. Daniel drove like a man retracing forgotten roads. Each turn sharpened with memory. Not of the vineyard or of Eliza, but of a cabin on the coast. A place he hadn't visited in years. A place he once bought as a retreat from the noise of the world, but which quickly became too quiet to bear. Now it would serve again, this time not as an escape, but as a shelter. The beach house sat on a bluff in Big Sur, nestled between redwoods and sea fog. It wasn't flashy. No gleaming marble, no glass elevator. Just dark cedar siding, wraparound windows, and the low hum of waves crashing beneath. When they arrived, the girls didn't ask where they were. Kara opened the door before he could, guiding Lily inside like she already knew the layout. Daniel carried their bags in silence. He hadn't meant to start thinking of it as their place, but something had shifted the moment Kara said her full name aloud in front of dozens of strangers. Charlotte Blackthorne had returned, not as a pawn in her grandfather's game, but as her own person. Lily padded barefoot across the wooden floors, her eyes wide as she stared at the spiral staircase and the tall windows. "It smells like books and salt water," she whispered. Daniel turned on the lights. "That's probably because I haven't had guests here in 6 years." Kara walked past him, inspecting everything. She checked window locks, deadbolts, kitchen drawers. He watched her move like a child who had grown up too fast, trained by fear, by displacement, by needing to be ready to flee at any moment. "You're safe here," he said gently. She didn't answer, but she didn't keep checking either. Later, they sat around a small table in the kitchen with mugs of cocoa, the house warm with firelight. Kara flipped through one of the re-inked music sheets while Daniel watched her silently. "These," she said finally, "are account numbers, offshore, coded in the clefs and the timing signatures." Daniel nodded. Malcolm Arledge confirmed it. Said they trace back to shell companies run by Edmund and Preston Bellamy. Kara's expression hardened. "Then you understand what happens next." "No," he said quietly. "What happens next is you both sleep. In real beds. With clean blankets. No one's taking anything from you tonight." Lily blinked sleepily. "Can I play the piano here tomorrow?" He smiled. "You can play it now if you want." She shook her head. "It's a night song. Morning songs are better." Daniel stood and gently took the music sheet from Kara's hand. "You're safe," he said again. "And you're not alone anymore." Kara looked up at him for a long time. Then very softly she said, "You believe us now." He nodded. "I believe you. And I'll protect you. Whatever it takes." That night, after the girls fell asleep upstairs, Daniel stepped out onto the deck overlooking the black ocean. The stars were spread thick across the sky, the air sharp with sea mist. His phone buzzed. "Marcus Feds have opened preliminary inquiries. Arledge is cooperating. But Edmund has deep ties, don't let your guard down." Daniel looked back toward the house where the faint sound of Lily's humming drifted down the stairs. He'd spent years building firewalls around his life, but these girls, they'd broken through with a song, and now he couldn't imagine going back. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting the living room in a low orange glow. Outside, the surf whispered its endless song against the cliffside, muffled by wind and thick glass. Daniel stood in the kitchen staring at a kettle that had long since stopped boiling. He hadn't made tea in years, not since, well before the silence had settled into his life like dust. Upstairs, the girls slept. He'd checked on them twice. Lily curled under a quilt, her sketchbook clutched loosely in one hand, the violin case tucked safely beneath the bed. Kara lay with her arms crossed over her chest, eyes closed, but not truly sleeping. Her breathing was too controlled, the kind you only learn after you've spent nights expecting footsteps in the dark. Now she stood behind him. He didn't hear her come down the stairs, but he felt her, like a shadow drawing closer. "I don't sleep well in new places," she said softly. Daniel turned but didn't speak right away. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants he'd found in a forgotten drawer upstairs. The shirt nearly swallowed her one of his old college tees, the print cracked and faded. I thought you were asleep, he said. So did I. He gestured to the couch. She sat legs folded under her arms, resting on her knees, with practiced stillness. He joined her, but not too close. He'd learned already Kara valued space, control, the ability to leave a room at any moment. For a long time, they just listened to the waves. You never asked how we got in your car, she said at last. I figured you had your reasons. We followed one of the caterers out of the building. The garage door was open long enough for us to slip through. We chose your car because it looked clean, expensive, like someone would notice if it went missing. Daniel smiled faintly. Strategic. We were going to leave before you showed up. He looked at her. Why didn't you? Kara hesitated. Lily was cold. She hadn't eaten all day. And something about the smell of the car reminded her of our dad's aftershave. Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't worn cologne in years, but the scent lingered in leather and memory in places no one could scrub away. You know she still thinks he's out there, Kara added. Sometimes I let her believe it. Daniel didn't answer. He knew what it was like to believe in things that were already gone. Kara leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling. You didn't have to take us in. No, he said. I didn't. She looked at him. Not suspiciously this time, but like someone recalibrating her compass. Are you going to keep us? She asked, almost a whisper. He didn't flinch. That's not up to me. Yes, it is, she said. You're the only one who isn't afraid of what we bring with us. Daniel let out a quiet breath. Then maybe it's time someone wasn't. Kara didn't smile, but for the first time her body relaxed, and when she stood and padded back up the stairs, she didn't look over her shoulder to check if he followed. She already knew he would. The headlines hit before sunrise. Daniel stood at the edge of the cliffside deck, his phone glowing pale blue in the pre-dawn light, casting hard shadows across his face. The morning chill bit through his sweater, but he didn't feel it. Not really. His name was everywhere. Billionaire CEO linked to missing Blackthorn heiresses, Renford wedding shock secret scandal, and a song that changed everything Eliza Hart Bellamy accuses. Former fiancé of manipulation, is he the girl's savior or their captor? His jaw clenched. 1,000 articles and none of them had the truth. The truth was sleeping upstairs 2 stories above a world that had already begun spinning its own narrative. Marcus's voice came through the phone, tight with urgency. Damage control is underway, but we've got a firestorm. Eliza's PR machine went live 3 hours ago. She's already framed you as a mentally unstable billionaire playing house with runaways. Daniel exhaled slowly, watching the fog drift along the sea cliffs. What about the sheet music? We've scanned it, digitized it. But unless someone corroborates the meaning behind the code, it's circumstantial. No judge is going to read a treble clef and convict a man. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. What about Arledge gone underground? We think he's still cooperating, but Edmund's people are scrubbing fast. We need something stronger. A knock came at the glass door behind him. Kara. She was fully dressed, her hair braided again, the violin case slung across her shoulder like a satchel. It's time, she said simply. Daniel lowered the phone. Time for what to tell our side. By noon, the video was live. They filmed it in the sitting room, sunlight filtering through the gauze curtains, the Pacific stretching endlessly behind them. No production crew, no polish, just Kara Lily and a quiet resolve. Kara sat forward in the armchair, hands folded in her lap. My name is Charlotte Blackthorn, she began. This is my sister Liliana. 6 years ago, the world was told we died in a yacht accident. That wasn't true. Her voice didn't shake. Our parents were murdered. Our grandfather, Edmund Blackthorn, orchestrated it to gain control of the family fortune. We were hidden, moved, erased. She paused, then continued. The only thing that stayed with us was our mother's music. Lily looked up at the camera, then eyes wide and earnest. She taught me to hide things inside the notes, things she was afraid to say out loud. And now, people are trying to stop us from sharing them. Daniel stepped into frame behind them, not looming, standing with. I didn't find these girls, he said quietly. They found me, and I will protect them until the truth is louder than the lies. It took hours barely, but the video spread like wildfire. Twitter exploded with hashtags: Blackthorn Girls, Justice, In the Notes, Renford Truth Celebrities reposted. Journalists scrambled. Eliza's PR firm tried to pivot, but her credibility had already cracked. Too many inconsistencies, too many people remembering the two little girls with wide eyes and careful manners from the old Blackthorn Foundation galas. And then came the break Daniel had been waiting for, a call from Panama. A woman's voice, trembling but fierce. "My name is Olivia March. I was their nanny. I know everything. And I'm ready to talk." An hour later, Daniel had her on a secure video call. Olivia's sun-lined face appeared on screen, her eyes shining. "I was there the night the boat was sabotaged," she said. "I saw the fear in Margaret's face. I helped smuggle the girls out. I've been in hiding ever since." Daniel didn't breathe for a full 3 seconds. "I still have documents," Olivia added. "And photos. I'll send them to you tonight." "Why now?" Daniel asked. "Because I saw that little one," she said, smiling gently. She played the song Margaret wrote for them. "And I knew. They made it." That night the tide began to turn. CPS issued a public statement of reevaluation citing emerging evidence and credible testimony. The court scheduled a guardianship hearing within the week. Eliza's engagement was indefinitely postponed. Preston vanished from public view. But the best moment came quietly. Daniel sat on the porch after dinner, the sky painted in strokes of lilac and flame. Kara stepped outside, a blanket over her shoulders. She handed him a drawing. It was a sketch, crude but tender, of the three of them. Daniel seated between the girls, a grand piano in the background. The caption below read, "We're not someone's story anymore. We're writing our own." Daniel looked up, his throat tight. "Do you still think it's not up to you?" Kara asked softly. He folded the sketch with care. "No. I think I knew the answer the moment I heard her play." It rained that night. Not the soft kind, but a restless, wind-laced downpour that beat against the glass windows of the safe house and howled through the pines. Daniel stood in the kitchen again, hand wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea he hadn't touched. The house creaked like an old ship at sea, and though he knew it was only the wind, something about it made his skin prickle. Upstairs the girls were asleep, or at least he hoped they were. Lily had gone to bed early, emotionally drained after recording the video. She hadn't even opened her sketchbook, just slipped into bed and whispered, "Will it really help?" before pulling the covers up to her chin. Daniel had told her the truth. It already is. Kara had stayed up later. She hovered near the laptop while Marcus video called from New York, asking her questions no child should have to answer. Dates, faces, account numbers she remembered from overheard phone calls. She never flinched. She was steel, that girl. But even steel corrodes if you keep it in the rain long enough. Daniel glanced toward the staircase and saw her coming down, quiet as ever. Sketchbook hugged to her chest, hair slightly damp. "I couldn't sleep," she said, stepping barefoot onto the tile floor. "Storm keeping you up?" he asked. "No," she said simply. The quiet after. She crossed the room and sat at the breakfast bar, flipping the sketchbook open. He noticed her hand trembling slightly. Not from fear fatigue. "I thought I'd draw it while I still remember," she murmured. Draw what? Kara turned the sketchbook around. It was a sketch of the wedding. Not the fake smiles and champagne, but the moment it broke. Eliza mid-scream, Preston lunging forward, and Daniel in front of the girls, shielding them. A swirl of flashbulbs, shadows, and bright white tension. In the center, Kara had drawn herself not wide-eyed or afraid, but tall, still, brave. "You captured it perfectly," Daniel said quietly. She closed the book. "I want to remember how I felt then, not what they tried to make me feel." There was something fiercely heartbreaking about her honesty. She wasn't asking to be seen as strong, she was strong, but it had cost her. And now she was trying to anchor herself to something she could control. "You know," Daniel said after a pause, "I used to think strength was about silence, not letting anyone see the cracks." Kara raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it?" "No," he said, surprised by how sure he felt. "It's about standing there with the cracks wide open and refusing to step back." Kara blinked. Her chin wobbled just for a second. Then she nodded. Thanks. He didn't touch her, didn't reach out, but she stayed in the kitchen a little longer after that, just drawing, listening to the rain, and when she left, she said goodnight. Not in words, but in something better. She left the sketchbook on the counter open to a new page, a pencil drawing of the safe house light pouring through the windows, 3 figures inside. 1 was tall, 2 were small, and above it in her tight, careful handwriting, home isn't a place. It's who stays when the storm comes. The storm passed by morning, but its echoes remained. The coastline was slick with dew, the trees still dripping like they hadn't stopped crying. Fog clung to the cliffs, softening the view of the ocean into a ghostly watercolor. Inside the safe house, the air was still almost reverent, like even the walls were holding their breath. Daniel sat at the kitchen table nursing black coffee and reading through a folder Marcus had emailed overnight testimonies, scanned bank records, a preliminary case file Olivia March had provided. The web of deceit tied to Edmund Blackthorne and Preston Bellamy was deeper than he'd feared. Offshore shell companies, falsified death certificates, illegally transferred trusts. It was enough to bury men for life if the right judge saw it. Footsteps padded down the stairs. Lily appeared first, still in pajamas, her hair wild with sleep. She clutched the violin case and gave him a sleepy smile. Kara followed a few moments later, already dressed, her expression alert. Always alert. Daniel closed the laptop. Hungry? Lily nodded. Do we still have those mini waffles? Check the freezer. I think we're on our last box. As Lily dug through drawers with the delighted chaos of a child finally safe enough to be messy, Daniel turned to Kara. Marcus says the hearing is being fast-tracked. We may be in court within 3 days. Kara's jaw tensed. Will it be enough? He didn't lie. It should be, but this family knows how to make noise and how to silence it, she murmured. A knock interrupted them. 3 short raps, sharp, measured. Daniel was on his feet instantly. Kara froze. The safe house was off-grid. No one should know they were here. He motioned for Kara to take Lily into the guest room. Kara hesitated but obeyed, gathering her sister quickly and closing the door behind them. Daniel approached the front door, cautiously checked the camera feed from the panel. 2 figures, 1 adult, 1 teenager, not cops, not press. Daniel opened the door slowly. The man standing there looked to be in his late 40s, black coat, peppered beard eyes, weathered from too many hard years. He didn't smile, but the teenager beside him stepped forward, chin-high, eyes fierce. My name is Aaron, he said. I used to live in Eliza Hart's charity home. I know what she did. Daniel blinked. Aaron reached into his jacket and produced a letter signed, stamped, and notarized. She made us pose for photos, told us we were her turnaround cases. But once the donations came in, she let the staff do whatever they wanted. The others, some of them disappeared. I ran. Daniel stepped aside, ushering them in. The older man, Aaron's mentor, a retired social worker, spoke next. I've helped him get this far, but he insisted on coming here personally. Said he needed to look you in the eye. Daniel turned to Aaron. Why me? Aaron's voice was steady. Because you didn't run when it got messy. You stayed. Daniel nodded. He took the letter eyes, scanning the contents. Dated, witnessed, specific. This was it. The final nail. Kara emerged from the hallway, eyes narrowed. Who is he? Daniel stepped back, gesturing toward Aaron. Someone who knows what it's like to be used and chose not to stay silent. Aaron turned to her, his voice softening. I remember you. From the gala years ago. You were the only one who said thank you when I opened the car door. Kara's eyes widened, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Daniel placed a hand on Aaron's shoulder. You just gave us what we need to win. Aaron nodded. Then it was worth finding you. That night, Daniel sent Marcus the full statement. The evidence from Olivia, the coded music sheets, the video of the girls, and now Aaron's testimony. The storm outside had passed, but the one coming next would change everything. The fire crackled low in the hearth that evening, casting long amber shadows across the wood-paneled living room. The storm had left behind a wet hush, as if the earth itself was holding still, listening. Daniel sat in his armchair with the notarized letter from Aaron resting on his knee, the weight of it somehow heavier than its pages. Across from him, Kara perched on the edge of the couch, shoulders, rigid arms folded across her chest, not in defiance this time, but in containment. Aaron sat on the floor beside the coffee table, legs crossed, posture open. He'd shed the edge of his arrival, now softened by the warmth of the fire and the cocoa Lily had insisted on making for everyone. She was asleep again upstairs, her violin finally quiet. Aaron looked up at Kara. "You don't remember me, do you?" Kara hesitated, then shook her head. "Not really. I wouldn't expect you to. You were maybe 5 or 6. You were wearing a navy dress with white bows and these little shoes that squeaked. Eliza's staff made you practice walking without sound before the donors arrived." Kara's mouth parted. A beat passed her eyes, flickering. Memories surfaced, not in words but in sensation. The squeak of shoes, the sting of correction, the hand that pressed too hard on her back. "You held Lily the whole time," Aaron added, "even when the lights were blinding. You didn't let her go once." Kara looked away, biting her lower lip. Daniel leaned forward. "What happened to the others in the program?" Aaron's face darkened. Some were moved around like furniture. Others, I don't know, gone, forgotten. Eliza got the praise, the checks, the magazine covers. But the foundation, it was a machine to bury us, keep us quiet while they polished her reputation. He tapped the letter. "I've had this for a year, was waiting for someone worth giving it to." Daniel's voice was quiet. "Why not take it to the media?" Aaron shrugged. "Noise doesn't equal change. I wanted it to matter." Kara looked at him, then really looked. "You ran, but you came back." Aaron nodded. "So did you." Something shifted in her, then a thread uncoiling. She stood slowly and crossed the room, pulling a page from her sketchbook. It was unfinished lines, rough but intentional. 3 figures, a girl shielding another, a boy watching from the corner, half in shadow. She handed it to Aaron. "That's you." Aaron took the page carefully, staring down at the penciled memory. "You saw me. I see everything," she said, "even when I try not to." Daniel felt something catch in his throat. It was happening again, this quiet, slow-burning transformation. From strangers into something more. Not family, not yet, but something just as powerful, witnesses to each other's survival. Aaron looked at Daniel. "When's the hearing?" "Wednesday." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Then let's bring it all. The truth, the files, the names, the music. Burn the whole rotten tree to the ground." Daniel nodded once firmly. "And plant something better." The courtroom was colder than it had any right to be. Daniel adjusted his tie as he stepped through the double doors of Family Courtroom 7B, the echo of polished shoes on marble trailing behind him. The building was modern, sleek lines, sterile lighting, but the energy inside was all tension and legacy. Cameras weren't allowed, but journalists lined the hallways, scribbling in notebooks and whispering into phones. Kara and Lily walked beside him, their hands clasped. Kara wore a navy blazer over a pressed blouse, her hair braided neatly down her back. She looked like a junior counsel, not a child. Lily wore a gray dress and ballet flats and held her violin case like it was a lifeline. No one asked her to let it go. Inside, Marcus waited at the table, already surrounded by files, exhibits, and a laptop open to a live chat with Olivia March, who was testifying via secure video link from Panama. Next to her on the screen, Aaron's statement glowed, bold and official. Every piece of this puzzle was lined up. Across the aisle sat Edmund Blackthorne. He looked smaller than Daniel remembered. Still sharp in his tailored suit, still flanked by lawyers, but there was something hollow in his eyes. Like a man who had rehearsed his power for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to face people who weren't afraid of him anymore. Next to him, unexpectedly, was Eliza. Her face was drawn, her makeup subtle. Not a trace of her usual performative perfection. She didn't look at Daniel, or at the girls. Her hands remained folded in her lap the entire time. The judge entered. "Please be seated," he said, already sounding tired. This is a preliminary hearing on the emergency guardianship petition filed by Mr. Daniel Renford in relation to minors. Charlotte and Liliana Blackthorne, previously declared deceased in 2016. We'll begin with opening statements. Marcus rose crisp and measured. Your Honor, what we present today is not just a custody case. It is a revelation of the truth. We will demonstrate that the girls seated beside Mr. Renford are survivors of a deliberate act of erasure orchestrated by the very man seated across from us. And we will show with testimony and evidence that Mr. Renford is not only a stable guardian, but the only adult in their lives who has acted without selfish motive or personal gain. The judge glanced toward Edmund's table. Counsel Edmund's attorney stood expression unreadable. Your Honor, my client will not deny that the tragedy of 2016 was traumatic for all involved. However, we contend that these girls are being used to defame a legacy. There is no verified DNA test, no formal identity documentation, only hearsay, and internet theatrics. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, yet. Then came the testimonies. First, Olivia March, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength as she described the yacht, the panic, Margaret's plan to encode evidence in music sheets. She held up a copy of the same sheet Lily had played at the wedding. Then Aaron, calm, composed. His voice cut through the room like a clean blade. Eliza Hart used us, not in theory, in practice. She created a facade of rescue while burying kids who didn't fit her image. I was one of them. These girls are blackthorns. I remember their eyes. And finally, Daniel. He stood heart-pounding but steady. I didn't go looking for them, he said. They found me. And from the first night I let them into my car, terrified, freezing alone, I knew they didn't need saving. They needed someone to stand still and not let go. He turned toward the girls. They've been hunted, hidden, and used, but not anymore. I'm not here as a hero. I'm here because I refuse to be a bystander. Kara met his gaze. Lily clutched her violin case tighter. The judge looked over his notes. The court recognizes that the claims made today merit urgent investigation. In light of the testimonies and documents submitted, emergency custody is hereby granted to Mr. Renford pending full review. Furthermore, he paused, removing his glasses. In light of new evidence submitted mid-hearing and the corroborated statements of Olivia March and Mr. Aaron Delano, I am ordering a federal investigation into Edmund Blackthorne and the Bellamy Foundation. This court will not be complicit in silence. Gasps erupted. Edmund's lawyer objected, flailing. Eliza's head dropped. The judge raised a hand. And one more thing. He turned to Kara and Lily. You're not lost anymore. You are seen, and from this point forward protected. Outside the courtroom, Daniel knelt between the girls, his voice rough with emotion. You're safe now. Lily looked up. Does this mean we can stay with you? Daniel smiled. Not just stay. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. Their names were on it. Kara's, Lily's, and his own. I filed to adopt you, the moment I realized I never wanted to let you go. Kara didn't speak. She just threw her arms around him. And for the first time, she cried. They didn't speak until they were back in the hallway. The courtroom doors swung shut behind them with a weighty finality, muffling the voices of reporters clamoring to get in. Inside, the judge's gavel had brought a sliver of justice to the surface, but out here it still didn't feel quite real. Daniel exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Kara stood motionless beside him, staring at the polished tile beneath her feet. Her arms were wrapped around herself again. Same posture she'd used when she was first standing in his penthouse kitchen, wary and cold. Only now there were cracks. Lily, still clutching her violin case, leaned her head against Daniel's hip, her small fingers wrapping around his coat. Are we really going home with you? Daniel looked down at her. Yes, he said softly. You are. Kara raised her eyes. What happens next? We start again, Daniel replied. Legally, we'll go through the full guardianship process, but the judge granted us emergency custody, which means you're with me. For good. Kara's brow furrowed. But what if they try again? What if Edmund finds a loophole? Or Bellamy's people come after us some other way? Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded paper thicker than most, slightly creased from where he'd kept it close all week. This, he said, handing it to her, is the adoption petition. Signed. Filed. With your names on it. Kara unfolded the page slowly, her eyes scanning the text. Her fingers traced over the printed names Charlotte Blackthorne, Liliana Blackthorne, and beneath them, written in the neat type of legal formality, was Daniel Everett Renford, prospective adoptive parent. She didn't speak, didn't blink. Lily peeked over her sister's arm. Does that mean we get your last name? Daniel crouched down so he was at eye level with both of them. Only if you want it. If you want to keep Blackthorne, you can. Or hyphenate. Or invent something brand new. I'll follow your lead. Lily smiled. Can we be Renford Blackthorne? Daniel tilted his head thoughtfully. That's got a nice ring to it. Kara still held the paper, but her hands weren't shaking. She looked up at him slowly. I thought no one would want us if they knew everything she said. All the danger, all the history, all the damage. Daniel's throat tightened. I didn't know how much I wanted you, he said, until you were already in my life. Now I can't imagine it without you. Kara didn't cry this time, but she stepped forward. And for the first time, not out of panic, not out of fear, she wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't stiff or guarded. It was clumsy, real, a moment of surrender wrapped in hope. He held her one hand against her back, the other gently resting over Lily's. And when Kara finally spoke, her voice was so small it nearly broke him. You can call me yours now. Spring arrived in whispers. It crept through the garden outside Daniel's penthouse, once sterile and minimalist, now alive with green shoots and soft petals. The wind carried a gentler song these days, one that hummed through the open balcony doors and drifted into the heart of the home. Lily's laughter came first, followed by the playful clatter of piano keys. She sat at the baby grand, her feet not yet reaching the pedals, but her hands dancing over the keys with growing confidence. A new melody was taking shape, half Mozart, half made-up magic. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Daniel watched from the doorway, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Across the room, Kara sat curled up in the corner armchair, sketching quietly. Her braid hung over one shoulder, and the sunlight caught on the silver Renford Blackthorne tag stitched into the corner of her hoodie, custom-made, a gift he'd ordered without asking. She'd worn it almost every day since. The adoption had been finalized just 2 weeks ago, but the shift had started long before that. In the little routines, in the meals cooked together, the shared movie nights, the occasional argument over which cereal to buy, and now this moment, home. Lily, Daniel called softly, play the Cherry Blossom song. Lily turned on the bench, eyes wide, the one Mama wrote, with the special part in the middle. He nodded. Kara glanced up from her sketchbook. They all knew the one. The coded melody, the one that had once carried secrets across silence, the one that now carried memory. Lily adjusted her fingers and began to play. The notes rose slow and clear, weaving through the living room like morning mist. The melody lingered in all the places grief had once lived, but now it didn't haunt. It honored. Daniel stepped out onto the balcony, the door left ajar behind him. The cherry blossom tree they had planted weeks ago stood in the center of the rooftop garden, delicate petals already falling in pink drifts. They had planted it together, Daniel, Kara, Lily, after the court hearing. For them, Lily had said, so they know we didn't forget. Kara had pressed her fingers into the soil, then stood up and whispered, and so they know we made it. Now the blossoms fluttered down with the music as if the song itself stirred the branches. Kara appeared beside him holding a folded piece of paper. Finished, she said simply. Daniel unfolded it. It was a new sketch. The three of them beneath the cherry tree, Lily at the piano, Daniel planting something new, Kara writing in a journal. Above their heads, instead of clouds, were lines of music notes, soft and bending like wind. It's us, Kara said after. Daniel smiled. It's beautiful. He reached out and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. Lily's song reached its final note. They stood there in the hush that followed. No lawsuits, no fear, no more hiding. Just three people once lost found in a moment that didn't need to be perfect, only true. Daniel took a breath and whispered what he hadn't dared say before. Welcome home. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into. It's who finds you in the dark and chooses to stay. This was a story about survival truth and the kind of love that rewrites the ending. If this story moved, you let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these moments travel. And if you believe in second chances and the power of chosen family, make sure to subscribe and click on the stories on the screen for more stories like this one. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.